So with that, we are just over 9 o'clock, and I would like to turn the screen over to our president, Clayton Harder.
Thanks, Eleni. I'd like to welcome everyone to the 2022 Annual General Meeting of the Manitoba Canola Growers Association. I'll go ahead and call the meeting to order. A few months ago, we were really optimistic that we would be hosting this meeting in person along with the Crop Connect conference, but shifts and extensions to public health orders made that not possible. We are once again grateful for the ability to meet virtually and carry on the business of your association, and we appreciate all of you taking the time to join us here today. Just a few reminders before we kick this off. Voting members will be asked to vote throughout the meeting using polls that will pop up on your screen. We'll be looking for people to move and second motions throughout the meeting. You can move or second a motion by clicking the raise hand function at the bottom of your screen. Unofficial results of the vote will be announced and visible to members. Votes will be audited and verified after the meeting, with official results captured in the meeting minutes. We have time scheduled throughout the meeting to address questions. You can type your questions in using the Q&A feature, including if you have a resolution from the floor. So our team behind the scenes has time to set up the necessary motions. For informal feedback or to chat amongst other attendees, please use the chat feature. We do have the option to have members speak to the meeting today. If you'd like to address the meeting on a topic, please let us know using the Q&A feature by typing, I have a question for, or I have a question about. We'll do our best to bring it in at the right time so you can bring you in at the right time so you can ask your question. If you have called into today's meeting or are a guest, you will not have access to the chat, Q&A, or voting features. If I lose my internet connection here at home, we have Vice President Chuck Fossey on standby to step in. Delaney and Leanne, along with Ron from Artisan, will be helping me out today throughout the meeting by monitoring Q&A, launching polls, and other computer-related tech things I'm happy I don't have to worry about. Everyone should have received a link to our AGM package prior to the meeting. If you have not had enough time to look at it or would like to reference it again, links can be found in the chat. This meeting will be recorded along with all questions and comments. If for some reason we are unable to get to a question, we'll reach out following the meeting. With all the details out of the way, let's get started. I'd like to start by introducing you to our board of directors. I am Clayton Harder. I farm just outside of Winnipeg in St. Clements and in Rosser, and I'm the president of the Manitoba Canola Growers Board. Our vice chair is Chuck Fossey, and he farms at Starbuck. Curtis McRae is our treasurer, and he farms in St. Andrews. And our secretary is Bill Nicholson, who farms at Shoal Lake. We round out the board of directors with Pam Bailey from Dakota, Nicola Dow from Portage La Prairie, and Jack Frazes from Winkler. Up next, I'd like to introduce our staff. Up first is our executive director, Delaney Ross-Burtnack. Leanne Campbell is our communication manager, and Karina Lepp is our grower engagement and extension manager. Jennifer Dick is our market development director. Amy Delacki joined the team in July as our research manager. Brenda Dick is our marketing and office administrator. Our finance coordinator is Oksana Taran, and Samantha Simon Verrier is our checkoff and member administrator. We're now going to move into the approval of the agenda. I hope you have all had time to review the agenda. It is on screen now. This time I'd ask Delaney to check the Q&A and see if there are any additions to the agenda. While Delaney is looking for that, I want to remind members that you can ask questions at any time throughout the meeting using the Q&A feature. Delaney, are you seeing anything there?
No, nothing popped up in the Q&A so far, Clayton.
Seeing no additions, I would now look for a mover and seconder to adopt the agenda as presented by clicking the raise hand function at the bottom of the screen. Just trying to use my computer here. Okay, we'll say Rory Qualley has moved and Calvin Penner has seconded that, simply because they're the top two names on my screen for no other reason that I can see here. So we have a mover and seconder, so a motion to adopt the agenda is presented. Please click in favor, or I guess if you're opposed, you could click that too.
Thanks, Clayton. We'll just give it a few minutes. We've got about half the votes are in so far.
Give everyone a little bit of time here. Yeah, once the voting window closes, we'll share the results.
All in favor there.
All in favor. Thank you. That is carried. Moving on to the minutes. Referring to the minutes from our 2021 AGM sent out prior to the meeting, and a link can be found in the chat. I would ask if there are any errors or omissions of the minutes. If so, I'll give you a few minutes to enter into the Q&A. As many of you know, our 2021 AGM was our first virtual AGM, and while maybe it isn't our preferred style of meeting, we have found it has benefits like reduced travel time and allowing farmers from across Manitoba to participate and still having time to go clean snow or refamiliarize yourself with the location of all the shear pins on your snowblowers, which is what I've become very accustomed to this year. Delaney, were any errors or omissions submitted?
No, I'm not seeing anything in the Q&A here, Clayton. Thanks.
Okay, I'd like to call for a motion to adopt the minutes from our February 11th, 2021 AGM. Need a mover and a seconder. Look for hands. See John Proyne has moved. Need a seconder. Say Pam Bailey has seconded. Okay, let's vote. While you're all voting, I'd like to also thank the other provincial grower groups for working with us to put on our AGMs this year. We value your partnership with other commodities, and working together, we're able to make our meetings as user-friendly and cost-effective as possible. Partnering also allows us to work with amazing people like Elena from Planners Plus and Ron and Adam from Artisan. We're all quietly working behind the scenes today and for months prior to this meeting to keep us all on track. Just looking for the poll results here. In favor, perfect, that's carried. All right, it is now time to share our 2020-2021 annual report, highlighting programs, events, and successes from August 2020 to July 2021. This will be immediately followed by updates from our national partners at the Canadian Canola Growers Association and the Canola Council of Canada. If you have any questions, please type them into the Q&A feature, clearly stating who the question is for. We will take time to answer questions following these reports.
Research projects and agronomy services are focused on agronomic priorities that hold specific value and relevance to Manitoba canola growers. Farmers directed just under $1.3 million into 57 research projects and core research infrastructure in the 2020-2021 year. Infrastructure investments included commitments to the new prairie crops and soils research facility at the University of Manitoba and Assiniboine Community College's new Assiniboine Prairie Innovation Center. Both facilities are designed to increase research capacity in Manitoba. Aimed at maximizing every research dollar invested, Manitoba Canola Growers operates within a robust research network made up of strategic alliances, including canola associations from across Canada, government organizations, and provincial commodity groups. These partnerships expand the focus beyond canola to include a whole farm approach. Completed and ongoing research projects, along with details about the new canola on-farm research program, can be found on our website at canolagrowers.com. Market development projects and initiatives operate under the Canola Eat Well brand. The program engages key opinion leaders to promote canola oil and canola farmers positively, willingly, and authentically. The program aims to cultivate a positive profile of canola oil and canola farmers to grow canola oil market share. In addition to Manitoba programming, Manitoba canola growers are proud to collaborate with SAS Canola and Alberta Canola nationally to reach urban consumers outside our home province. The Canola Eat Well program builds connections and fosters conversations between those who grow canola and those who choose it for their kitchens. This past year, a 3-part virtual learn-along series saw guests from coast to coast come together to learn from culinary experts, farmers, scientists, and food leaders that ignited impactful conversations and community sharing. In addition, a highly engaged community including chefs, food communicators, health professionals, farmers, and more shared their excitement and love for canola all year round through television interviews, social media, cookbook releases, virtual demos, and more. The Canola Eat Well community connects farmers and consumers together through shared experiences, conversation, and curiosity around food and agriculture, which ultimately amplifies the voice of farmers and reaches a larger and more diverse audience. Join the conversation and share your stories with us at canolaeatwell.com. Designed to support and engage farmers, Manitoba Canola Growers tailors programming to maximize members' return on their checkoff investment by matching learning opportunities to members' needs. As with many organizations, COVID-19 required the continued cancellation of in-person events. But farming doesn't stop for a pandemic, and neither did we. We continue to offer virtual learning opportunities, including a timely webinar series looking at flea beetle management in April, in-crop spraying recommendations in May, and harvest management best practices in July. We are committed to continually offering programs and resources that give farmers the opportunity to explore the latest data, connect with experts, and network with fellow farmers, arming them with the information they need to make the best decisions for their farms. Manitoba canola growers regularly bring farmer feedback, concerns, and insight forward to policymakers and lobbying partners, presenting a unified and trusted voice that builds upon the positive reputation and trustworthiness of Manitoba canola farmers. Within Manitoba and across Western Canada, drought hit farmers hard last season, resulting in numerous government consultations to ensure farmers' voices were represented in discussions around business risk management and contract shortages. In partnership with the Canadian Canola Growers Association and the Canola Council of Canada, Manitoba farmers' voices were heard, expressing the potential opportunities and challenges that come along with the Clean Fuel Standard and future sustainability and carbon-related programming and targets. On top of advocating with current government officials, Manitoba canola growers are also focused on connecting with youth and consumers to create a deeper understanding of agriculture and canola. This engagement contributes to positive conversations, increased agriculture literacy, and positive support for agriculture outside of the agriculture community. Connecting with current policymakers and building a positive canola connection with future decision makers will help ensure the long-term sustainability of canola and agriculture in general. Focused on farmers, Manitoba canola growers understand the value of an interactive communication network that engages a wide cross-section of experts and resources. Communication tools like the Canola Growers website, Canola Crush newsletter, Canola Digest magazine, and social media platforms all share valuable and timely information on a wide range of current, practical, and relevant topics. This includes canola production, agronomic resources, research results, market development strategies, advocacy updates, leadership opportunities, event promotion, and more. Connecting farmers with information and networking opportunities drives innovation and growth for the canola sector and canola farmers. Engage with us in person, by email, or online through our interactive social media network using our handle @CanolaGrowers.
We'll now move into reports from our two national canola associations. Up first, I'd like to welcome Rick White, President of the Canadian Canola Growers Association, which is a national ag policy organization and an administrator of the Advanced Payments Program. Jack Frazen and I sit on the CCGA Board of Directors representing Manitoba canola growers alongside the other provincial canola groups. Welcome, Rick.
Thank you, Clayton. Pleasure to be here, and good chilly morning to everyone, at least within Manitoba. Great to be here, so thank you. I really struggled with trying to figure out what to talk about here because there's just so much going on, but I will hit some of the key highlights I think that probably most relevant to farmers on the call here. The three main topics that I really want to just cover briefly this morning is the Agriculture Carbon Alliance. I'll give you a quick update on that. Biofuels, I'll make a few comments about that, and then I'll wrap it up with the next policy framework and particularly BRM programming as we see going forward, all of which CCGA is involved in, among other things. So just a little bit of background, starting with the Agriculture Carbon Alliance. On the issue, particular of carbon emissions and pricing, we realized that no one farm group or commodity group could be influential enough on its own. So CCGA asked ourselves, can we unite every major national farm group in Canada under one banner for agri-environmental advocacy? And after a lot of work, the answer was yes. And as a result, the ACA was launched in March 2021. The ACA was established to ensure that Canadian farmers' sustainable practices are recognized through a policy environment that maintains their competitiveness, supports their livelihoods, and leverages their critical role as stewards of the land. The ACA is co-chaired by our own Dave Carey with CCGA and Scott Ross from the Canadian Federation of Agriculture. There's also a technical working group under that organization, which is also co-chaired by CCGA and CFA. The ACA membership consists of 14 national farm groups representing every major commodity from export-oriented to supply managed. So I just want to touch briefly on some action here that ACA has taken very recently. ACA continues to working on moving a private members bill, and I'll call it PMB, or on-farm exemptions of propane and natural gas from carbon pricing through Parliament. Private members bill C-234, an act to amend the Greenhouse Gas Pollutions Pricing Act, sponsored by Ontario Conservative MP Ben Lobb, was introduced and read the first time on February 7th, so this is quite recent. It is anticipated to be debated for the first time at second reading in March, and it's likely to be well over a year for the bill to successfully go through the entire legislative process. The bill will cover on-farm exemptions from carbon pricing for critical farming practices, including grain drying, heating and cooling livestock barns and greenhouses, steam flaking, and irrigation. ACA will support the bill through a dedicated advocacy strategy that involves direct lobbying of parliamentarians, committee appearances to get this bill passed. So that highlights of that one. I'll maybe flip the biofuels briefly here. CCGA is actively working on the clean fuel regulations, CFR, at the political, policy, and technical levels. Federally, this policy is being led by Environment and Climate Change Canada. This policy has potential to benefit canola as a feedstock due to its carbon intensity properties, large-scale availability in Western Canadian processing sector. 4 of the 5 new processing plants announced in 2021 specifically referred to the potential of renewable fuels as a major market factor influencing investment decisions. So the CFR regulation is expected to be finalized in the spring of 2022. The CFR will sit on top of the provincial biofuel policies now in place from BC to Quebec, which covers 93% of diesel used in Canada. And the final package will have both the regulation and the new full life cycle analysis tool, which will be the way that feedstock, such as canola, that will be used in low carbon fuels and how to get their carbon intensity score, which will be very important. This is where the rubber hits the road and determines the eligibility of Canadian canola. So we're watching this very closely and very involved. But we're also working very closely with Canola Council of Canada and the Canadian Oilseed Processors Association, COPA, and broader associations like Forestry, Canadian Fuels, Biofuels Associations, et cetera, and specific major commodities in the fuel industry on several remaining issues of concern with the proposed CFR. So there's some details there that we need to continue having extensive discussions, also with our provincial departments as well. So that covers that one off very briefly. And finally, I'd like to get into a little bit about the next policy framework, particularly the business risk management portion of that. We really are advocating to ensure that farmers have access to effective and responsive risk management tools. It's a key priority for us here at CCGA. The current policy framework under which BRM programs are funded is set to expire in March in 2023. So CCGA is working with other farm groups to ensure governments understand the need to invest in business risk management programs for farmers. The risks farmers are required to manage on their farms has changed over the last decade, and BRM programs also need to evolve to ensure they remain effective and relevant to the current environment the farmers are operating in. No one knows that more than you on this call. The policy framework also funds critical areas such as research and market access activities. CCGA is asking the governments to increase investments in the next policy framework to reflect ongoing inflation and the broader public policy expectations on environmental demands placed on Canadian producers. The existing priorities like trade, research, and BRM remain relevant and require consistent levels of support. Additional or enhanced policy priorities such as added emphasis on environment and climate change and adaptation and mitigation, that's going to require additional investment and cannot come at the cost of reduced support for current agricultural policy framework policy priorities, I should say. So in closing and wrapping up here, I just want to very briefly touch on that we are active in ensuring the government understands that science-based decision-making needs to be incorporated across regulations and programs here ongoing and into the future. As an example, we are engaging with government in several areas to emphasize the importance of sticking with science-based decision-making. One that comes up in particular is that there are changes being made to PMRA, Pest Management Regulatory Agency, through the addition of a new independent expert advisory committee. So there's some changes coming our way there through that agency, and we're pressing the importance of working with industry to establish environmental solutions and targets that ensure farmers' competitiveness is not undermined, because this is the agency that authorizes the use of pesticides in Canada and regulates that. So we're watching that and actively involved. One final point is the emissions reduction plan as it pertains to fertilizer. So one of the objectives identified in the strengthened climate plan is to reduce fertilizer emissions by 30% below 2020 levels by 2030. I'm sure you've all heard about this. Given the importance of nitrogen for sustainable yield intensification and achieving our production targets of 52 bushels per acre and 26 million tons of production, it is essential that the emissions reduction plan focuses exclusively on emission reductions and not the use of nitrogen, and that any plan that the government has, should not and shall not erode farmer competitiveness. So that's our messaging on that. So that's the very quick highlights. Clayton, I'll turn it back to you, sir.
Thanks, Rick. Quick reminder that we'll take all questions at the end of these presentations. Up next is Jim Everson to share his report as the president of the Canola Council of Canada, which represents the entire canola value chain, including exporters, processors, and life science companies. Farmers are also represented on this board, with Chuck Fossey sitting as our Manitoba rep. Welcome, Jim.
Well, thank you very much, Clayton. You can hear me okay?
Yeah, loud and clear.
So thanks very much, and thank you for the help with the person helping with the slides. You can just move maybe to the next slide, and I wanted to thank the Manitoba canola growers for having the Canola Council here today. The growers, Manitoba growers, play a really influential and strong voice at the table of the value chain, and you can see there the membership of the Canola Council of Canada. Just a reminder that the council represents the full value chain, including growers and the exporters, life science companies, and processors. So very much value the contribution from the whole value chain. So perhaps we can go to the next slide, and I wanted to focus, like Rick did, on three major areas. So these are the three areas that the Canola Council really focuses on, and a significant number of issues involved in all of them. But as Rick did, I'll try to concentrate on a few key priorities. So I would just work through each of these quickly, and then be ready to take any questions that come later. So if I go to the next slide on sustainable supply. So as you will be aware, the Canola Council of Canada has a team of crop agronomists, agronomy specialists across Western Canada, and the main function through 2021 and looking into 2022 has been to really focus on agronomic challenges to help support producers with canola production. There is a strong global demand for canola, and our goal here is to help support growers to reduce risk, maintain profitability, and ultimately to produce more canola for the industry in Canada and for global markets. So in 2021, obviously, it's a very significant, very difficult growing season, and we turned our agronomy specialist attention to supporting growers week to week and day to day with the challenges that they were facing because of dry and hot weather. In Manitoba, flea beetles and regrowth were major issues, and our team, through Canola Watch and other communication sources, attempt to provide timely, valuable, science-based agronomic information and tactics to growers to meet those challenges. Rick did an excellent job talking about the issues around science-based decision-making and regulatory issues of the Government of Canada, including the Pest Management Review Agency. So we work very closely with the Canadian Canola Growers Association on that. And I think Rick said it all in terms of what we are working on in terms of communicating the importance of science-based decision-making to support crop protection products for growers. And ultimately, also in the global market, we export 90% of what we grow in canola in Canada, and it's critical that decision-making globally be based on science. And it's really important that the Government of Canada follow science, so that when we're faced with market access issues that are not science-based in some of our global markets, that Canada has the credibility to maintain a science-based approach to those international regulatory issues. So there too, it's critical that we continue to demand that of our government. Rick also mentioned the nitrogen management issues, so I won't get into that. Also, another area where the Canola Council, through the whole value chain, is very much involved in the strategy around how to manage the requests, not only from the Government of Canada and the challenge that Rick outlined for reduction of emissions, but increasingly we're getting questions around sustainability and emissions issues from global markets and from food companies in North America and in Europe and so on. And so really important that we advance the agenda in that area. We are reviewing the variety registration process. That's a project that's been started by the Government of Canada in Ottawa, and that's being done through Canola Council Committee that's being chaired by Chuck Fossey from the Manitoba Canola Growers Association, and involves the whole value chain around how to manage issues around variety registration. So those are some of the things that we're doing on the sustainability supply side. If you can go to the next slide, I noted that in the report from the Manitoba Canola Growers Association, the annual report, a real focus on the research and innovation agenda, and discussion around was mentioned that there are 57 projects underway that the Manitoba Canola Growers Association are partly involved in. Many of those are coordinated by the Canola Council of Canada, and the funding that the Manitoba Canola Growers Association gives to the Canola Council is meant to have our team help support and coordinate that agronomic research. Much of it is also co-funded with the Government of Canada through the Agri-Cluster program. So the Canola Council is the advocate for that program, and we coordinate that research. So a really important part of that in 2022, and a big focus for our association in 2022, is the negotiation of the new five-year policy framework, which includes additional funding for another 5 years of agronomic research. And so we're very focused on ensuring that we're prepared for that discussion. Delaney Ross-Burtnack from the ED, the Executive Director of the Manitoba Canola Growers Association, has been involved in a steering committee as the Canola Council has consulted the industry and updated our innovation strategy. And that is designed to ensure that we have a really good positioning going into negotiations with the Government of Canada to increase funding and to support agronomic research going forward. So we will be doing that as a real priority in 2022. The next agenda item and the next slide is around market access and competitiveness. And this is all about ensuring that we have access to global markets. There's a number of issues that are on the screen here that we are currently working on, including the issue around PMRA that we have talked about a bit earlier. We are working really closely with the Canadian Canola Growers Association and the provincial commissions also on biofuels. And once again, Rick really covered that territory, so I won't go into that. We work very closely with the CCGA with respect to the Canadian clean fuel regulation that Rick mentioned. But we also are very much working to make sure that we have access to the Renewable Fuels program in the United States. Currently, Canada can sell canola to the United States for the biofuels industry, but there's enormous investment taking place in the renewable fuels side of things in the United States, which is a different technology and a different pathway. And the Canola Council of Canada is working to ensure that we have approval at the Environmental Protection Agency to have access to the renewable fuels program in the United States, so Canadian canola can enter to that segment. And we hope this summer to be successful in ensuring that pathway is in place, and then Canadian canola can be used in the U.S. renewable fuels program. So once again, another part of our biofuels market access work. And then finally, the third priority, and the next slide, is around utilization and promotion. And the Canola Council really focuses on global markets to ensure that we are explaining the health benefits, the reliable supply and quality aspects of Canadian canola. And you'll see there carbon emissions and sustainability on the list, as I mentioned earlier. Increasingly, global market participants are interested in hearing from Canada about the contribution canola growers and the canola industry make to carbon reduction. A very important global issue for food manufacturers and for other countries. And sustainability. Unfortunately, we have a lot to say on that. Canola growers are very sustainable. We are leaders in the world in sustainable farming practices. And canola is a low carbon product, as we see through our success in the biofuels area. So we have a lot to say in that area, and I think it's an area where we need to continue to tell our story both domestically and in global markets, and so we're working to do so. So that's our utilization and promotion program, and it's been affected certainly by the pandemic. It's made it impossible to travel to other markets to do in-person seminars and that sort of thing, but we've replaced that with a significant number of virtual trade missions with all of our major markets. And we also have an outreach program with our trade commissioners, Government of Canada trade commissioners, and representatives embassies around the world to make sure that they're aware of our messages around canola in global markets, because they work day to day with clients in those markets. So that's our utilization and promotion program on behalf of the value chain. So just in conclusion, I think the key issues that we're really focused on the next slide, a key part of it is these environmental messages and making sure that governments and customers understand that Canadian canola growers are leaders when it comes to sustainability and carbon emission reduction, that we meet the challenges of requirements to reduce emissions. And secondly, intensification of production. There's very, very strong global demand for canola across markets. That's been increased by the interest in the biofuels and renewable fuels segment. And our challenge is to ensure that we can increase yields in Canada to meet that global demand. So I'll leave it there. In my final slide, I just have some information here. The Canola Council of Canada is a depository of some really significant amounts of information around canola production. And so on the screen there, you can see the various information sources. And I certainly invite all growers to make use of the data that's available, that's free to access on the Canola Council and on the Manitoba Canola Grower websites. There's a huge number of links there into various aspects of canola production that could be helpful to growers. And so hopefully growers are making good use of that information. So thank you, Mr. Chair, and I appreciate the time here today.
Thank you very much, Jim. And thanks, Rick, for sharing the updates and joining us to take questions here today. Delaney will moderate the questions that members have entered into the Q&A. We realize that some questions may be complicated to type, or you may be a slow typer like me. If you'd prefer asking your questions, to ask your question that way, just type in, I have a question for Rick, Jim, or myself in the Q&A, or use the raise hand function and we will invite you to unmute yourself so you can ask your question. Delaney, I'll turn it over to you.
Great, thanks, Clayton. So we've got a couple of questions so far. So I'll start with one from Ron Cron. He had asked for comment on any of the work done from the resolution last year on export sales reporting program. This was directed at you, Rick, but we actually were going to offer an update on that a little bit later. So what I might do is just like move that up, and then if you have any commentary to add to that, I'll turn that over to you. So thanks for that question, Ron. So the update on the export sales reporting program that was brought forward to add valuable knowledge to aid producers in the marketing of their production. We did take this request forward to our national policy partners at the Canadian Canola Growers Association, and they included that in their joint submission to modernize the Grain Commission and the Canada Grain Act. So we were pleased to see that the request was reflected in Agriculture Canada's What We Heard report, and that the request was also brought directly to Ag Canada and the Grain Commission. The review of the Grain Act was mentioned in the minister's mandate letter, so there is direction at the highest level to continue with the modernization efforts. So we know that the Canadian canola growers are committed to pursuing this in the new year, recognizing that a mandate change like this or a more detailed activity change for the Canadian Grain Commission will require legislative change, and it's not just like a regulatory change or even within their operations to be able to just decide to go ahead and do it. So it's a more significant undertaking, and we really appreciate CCGA's support in that. So we as an organization are happy that the first steps have been taken and that they have been positive and heard. And we're committed to keeping our members informed as the work continues. So Rick, I would just check with you. Is there anything that you would add to that?
No, I don't think so. Delaney, you covered it well. Just know that CCGA, we've heard it. We've started to deal with it, like Delaney said, and there's going to be ongoing efforts to make sure that governments and officials do not forget the request, because it is important. We've heard it, and we're continuing to carry that message forward through the course of this coming year too. Thanks, Delaney.
Perfect. Thanks, Rick. Great. So a few other questions. Janet Johansson has a question for you, Rick. I'll just read it out here. So has CCGA been in discussion with AAFC's Environmental Policy Division? As my understanding is that they have been mandated to build a program to reduce on-farm fertilizer emissions by 30%, but the division at this point is currently building the policy for implementation. It's my understanding they do not at current moment have actually know how this policy will be implemented and or measured or monitored. So Mary Jane, DD of SPB, I'm not going to guess at what that breaks down to in the Enviro division, appears to be very open to receive information or ideas from producers on practical measures or best management practices that could help them form the policy. So Rick, would you have some thoughts on that?
Yeah, thanks for the question. Sorry for my phone ringing. I can't get it stopped here, but it'll quit. Yeah, I mean, the short answer is yes. I mean, we talk particularly within the agricultural departments specifically to deal to raise that issue. And it's not just there at that department level, it's in all levels of ECCC, because there's environmental threads tying onto this everywhere too. So ag and ECCC were very active, both at the bureaucratic level, getting our message out. The Canola Council, Jim and I, like CCGA, we'll be meeting with Minister Renewable this afternoon, and that's some of our key message to her directly. So she's in charge of the entire agriculture portfolio, as you know, so we are going to bring it up to her to make sure it rises to her attention through us. And we had significant lobby sessions last week with many MPs of in all corners of the government, federal government, and this has been part of our speaking notes too. About this is a concern. We need to focus on emission reduction if that's what they want, but not a non-science-based approach by just limiting fertilizer use. Let's get back to the science and get back to the what's important. If it's emission reduction, let's talk about that. Don't dictate how to do it through fertilizer restrictions.
That's great. Thanks, Rick. We've got a couple more questions. One is Ian Robson, and I also see Butch has his hand up. Ian, I see you have your hand up now. Did you want to speak to your question? I think your question came in first, so I apologize. I'm not sure who was first there.
Yes, if I might ask this person, Delaney.
Go ahead, Ian.
It's working. Oh, thanks, everyone. Very interesting to take part in a virtual meeting. Trying hard to get used to all this process. Anyway, Rick White, regarding best management practices and business risk management, farmers in error think that we're part of industry. We're not. Farmers look after the land. We take big risks, and there are clear differences in the interest of farmers from that of industry. The science on carbon cycle is not complex, but it has been twisted to think that biofuels is reducing overall carbon release. Best management practices such as rotations, intercropping, and better placement and use of nitrogen are proven and known best management practices to reduce carbon emissions. Will the canola industry actually use science to measure the total carbon emissions from biofuels?
Yeah, thanks, Ian. Yes, we do. That's why you have the Manitoba canola growers and the Canadian canola growers. I mean, we focus on grower interest, but we do work because there's implications for the rest of the industry. So that's where the Canola Council comes in as well. So these things farmers are tied to the rest of the industry, but your point is things are happening on farm that are farmers' business, and that's very relevant. In fact, we talked about that at our last board meeting. Delaney probably recall, I raised the issue of a life cycle analysis of on-farm production period so that farmers know where they're at, and we need that science and we need that data. We understand that all the good practices, sustainable practices that farmers are currently employing, A, need to be communicated, and B, need to be quantified better so that we can show the science behind our opinion on this, Ian, so that we can justify and have a credible reaction to farmers and say, not only are they doing all this, which is good practices, here's the results of them doing it. And this is what's being kind of managed on farm and emissions on farm as they pertain to farming production practices. So I agree with you, Ian, but that's a lot of data, which means that somehow we need to measure this better on farm, and that might be a little intrusive on farmers. So that's the balancing act that we have right now, but agree 100%. We need science and we need data to prove our case. Thank you.
If I might add supplement, please. Absolutely, Rick. And there's a lot of data. However, we don't need to get our shirts in too big of a knot, because you can easily measure soil organic matter. You can go out in your field, and if you smell the soil and it smells sweet, then you have good soil. If you're losing all of the microorganisms and all of the microbiology in the soil, your soil is not going to smell sweet. And you might ask yourself as a farmer, maybe industry has done this to my soil. And so it's fairly straightforward science. Carbon goes into the soil, carbon comes out of the soil. We as farmers make use of it as it does that cycle. It's the fossil carbon that we are making use of that is our problem. And we cannot deny the science of reality. We have to come to terms that there is consequences of our actions. And we've seen that. We've seen all kinds of runoff from the soil. Wetlands are being destroyed. Wetlands are places to sequester carbon. And yet, for reasons of industry, myself included, bushes and sloughs get pushed. This is a mistake. It's costing us. It's costing us our image amongst the rest of the public. And we're not dealing with reality at all. We need to actually take account for Mother Nature. And so I'm not being harsh about this. Every one of us knows about natural conditions and how they work. It should be fairly easy to implement better management practices that will be of benefit to our image as farmers. So that's where we should be at.
Great, thanks for that, Ian.
There's
Go
always
ahead,
room for, no, there's good points there. And there's always room for improvement everywhere. And that's what should be our focus. And certainly your points also within the Q&A, the comment about managing fertilizer related carbon emissions through the use of best management practices is something that we can all follow. And your comments about soil carbon, those are noted too. I appreciate those comments. Thanks, Ian.
Thanks, Clayton.
Thanks.
Great, we've got a few more minutes for questions, and we have two. I see, Butch, you've got your hand up. If you are able to ask your question, please.
This is Butch.
Hi, Butch.
Yes, I noticed an almost overused word, science-based. To me as a farmer, I'll tell you what science-based is. If I have flea beetles on my field and I don't know when to spray, I go in the outside rounds, I count all the flea beetles, the percentage, and then I take a calculator and I figure it out whether I should spray or not. And after you've done a couple of thousand acres of that, well, you find out that that really isn't practical. You might as well just take your spray and spray the damn thing. And that's, to me, is the difference. On the converse, science-based says probably that desiccating your wheat and your canola is a good thing. Practicality tells us as farmers that really, in the long run, that ain't the best thing. So I think we are using the word science-based sometimes to justify the big industry and not for farmers. So this is an overworked word, and I'm a little suspicious of it. Now, on my farm this year, and maybe it'll be mentioned in the agronomic report, our worst 2 weeks in farming are spraying for flea beetles. And we have yet not found a solution for that. We've on the technology and etc. The other thing that has not been mentioned, and it may be coming up again, one of the biggest concerns, and I believe canola growers are probably the biggest ones involved, large ones involved with this, and it's an issue that the Farmers Union and the Western wheat growers have brought up, is selling on futures and having the huge buyouts. We need to look at marketing and act of God clauses, and there are examples where act of God clauses are used. CDEX does it, Red River Seeds does it, Nipawin does it with their specialty canolas, and this is a big issue on farming, and somehow we seem to think it isn't there. There have been millions of dollars written in accounts that weren't made, and the solution seems to be just learn more about marketing. And that really isn't the answer. We need to look at act of God clauses in the future. Those are all the concerns that I have as a farmer now. Maybe they're not important to anybody else, that's fine.
I think they're important to others, Butch. Thank you so much for those comments. I see, Rick, you've unmuted. Did you have some thoughts there?
Yeah, thanks, Butch. You know, when I talk about science-based, it's usually within the context of talking to the government, because they're the ones that's going to implement legislation and regulations. And I just keep saying, for heaven's sake, it needs to be based on outcomes, not on process, and it needs to be based within science, particularly things like PMRA. They just need to look at the impact on the environment and the toxicity of it to the environment and the application and the dosage that's required to do it safely. And that's what they do. Stick to the science. Don't stick to the political rhetoric around the edges of that and start banning products or restricting products that are not based on anything but politics, as opposed to hard evidence. That is the science-based approach. It's less about what farmers are doing from a scientific perspective, Butch, but we do need to measure what we're doing more so that we can provide the evidence required to make our case and substantiate our claims that we are doing a good job and we will be doing a better job in the future.
Thanks, Rick. Yeah, and to the point about the flea beetles and on farm, like the impact that has on farmers, there was no better year that highlighted that example than this past year. And actually just recently MCGA supported some funding around a flea beetle research study where looking at the impact of having sowing canola into a standing or existing fall rye crop, or having like a companion barley or oat crop sown down with it at a lower rate to sort of confuse or throw some new way of, you know, pushing flea beetles off. The current way that farmers, including myself, have been managing it is it's getting harder and harder, and we need to find some better solutions. So that is noted, and MCGA is working on that too. Delaney, is there any other questions you're seeing here?
Yeah, there is one more. I think it's a relatively quick question, so I might just steal a few extra minutes here to answer it. So this came from the YouTube live stream for Rick or Jim, whoever wants to dive in with this one. What are the key differences in biofuel versus renewable fuel as it relates to canola?
Well, I'll just take a quick stab at it. It really is a technology-driven change in the fuels market that can be supported by organic crops. So, biofuels is a product that is created and then mixed in with traditional diesel fuel. So you have a mixed amount of final fuel, which includes a certain percentage of a biofuels that's been developed. In the case of renewable fuels, it's a change in the refining process. So you can take canola oil, in our case, and to put it directly into the refining business, the traditional refinery. And the output is a renewable fuel, which is chemically equivalent to petroleum diesel, but has considerably reduced greenhouse gas emissions associated with it because of the use of the canola feedstock. So it's a different technology. And because there's a lot of investment in that technology in North America, it's really a technology-driven change that can be quite substantial in terms of the possible canola uptake. There aren't a lot of other additional feedstocks that can flow in to the renewable fuels sector that can scale up the way the canola industry can. So that's where the difference lies. I hope that's helpful, Delaney. Rick may add something.
Great. Thanks, Jim. Oh, good there, Rick? Okay, very good.
Thanks, Jim. Delaney, I see Wilfred, do you have another question? I see your hand is raised. I know we're a little over the time on the agenda, but not substantially. What is your hand raised now, or is it still up from before, Butch?
Yes, it was raised. The question which concerns a lot of farmers this year is financial, having to do with buyouts on canola. And are we looking at something where we could look closer at, where the industry could look at, even for a small premium, ensure some act of God clauses in this, because this is a big concern. There are some very good prices out there right now, but a lot of us are, not on our farm, but a lot of farmers got burnt last year, and you could lose a whole year's profit if you have a crop failure. So are we looking at that situation?
Rick, we did talk about that a little bit at CCGA meetings in the fall, but I'm struggling to recall right now where that discussion went or where we're going. Can you help with that?
Yeah, we were struggling as well with how to approach grain contracts because it is an open market, right? And so we had ideas around, well, maybe there should be a bit of standardization of those contracts. The question is, how do you do it? One way we thought of was, maybe the grain company should be posting their template grain contract, so we can farmers can look at who's got an act of God clause or not within the contracts, just to bring some transparency to the market. I don't know how you bring that along. We thought maybe the Canada Grains or the Grain Commission could be involved in that because there was some regulations put forth by, I believe, Jerry Ritz at the time as ag minister to put in some clauses into grain contracts. It wasn't act of God clauses, but so there's an approach there that we've been still thinking about, but we really are struggling with how far do you push and interfere with commercial relationships between farmers and grain companies? How much do you want to standardize, or how much do you want to be able to negotiate as an individual farmer? That's a question too. But we've had extensive, I wouldn't say extensive, but this really came up when a lot of farmers were short on their contracts, and we had some heavy discussions. We haven't given up on the discussions, but we just haven't really got our heads wrapped around it yet. It's a complicated issue, no doubt.
Thank you.
Farmers are going to note, just reading in the media as of late too, and a large company like Bayer can enforce a force majeure when they're unable to meet their glyphosate deliveries, and farmers are going to see that in the media too. And okay, well, where's our out when we have a production issue? Okay, we should get moving along here with the agenda. Thanks, Eleni. Thank you, Rick and Jim, again for joining us here to take part.
Great, thanks.
Next on the agenda, we'll move into the financials. To do that, I'll turn the meeting over to our treasurer, Curtis McRae.
Hey, thanks, Clayton. I'm happy to share with everybody our 2020-21 audited financial statements. If you didn't have a chance to review them, we have a link in our chat box. It'll be up near the top because people have been doing a little bit of chatting, which is awesome. And now I'm going to welcome our accountant, Alex George, so he can walk us through our audited financial statements. So it's all yours, Alex.
Thank you very much. So we'll start with the title page here. I'll switch to there we go. Yeah, so this is the review of the audited financials for Manitoba canola growers. For 2021, it was an unqualified opinion, meaning the statements are presented fairly in all material respects. Going to the next slide there. For bank, it did increase by $208,000, but was expected due to net income for the year. For investments, that's the total fair market value is $6.08 million. These investments have a cost base of $5.19 million, giving cumulative unrealized gains of $896,000. There is a wind down was unchanged for $540,000, and the restricted portion is down $100,000 as reserves were used to sponsor that ACC Prairie Innovation Center. Going into the receivables, checkoff receivables were down $266,000 to $226,000, mostly just due to a timing issue, collecting before the year end instead of after. Trades receivable were up. The bulk of that $180,000 is due to the Alberta Canola Producers Commission of $168,000 receivable. Prepaids were up $178,000 to $357,000. The bulk of the increase is the $100,000 Prairie Innovation Center sponsorship. The sponsorship starts and runs for 5 years once the building is in operation. As of the year-end date, the center had not opened yet. The remaining prepaids consist of the PSI lab funding of $167,000 and advertising of around $60,000. Going into capital assets, there was an increase in cost of around 7,000, and that's due to new computer equipment that was purchased during the year. Tablets, iPads, computers, and laptops, and no assets were disposed. Moving to the next slide. Accounts payable stayed fairly consistent. They're made up of trades payable of 510,000. The main vendors being Canola Council of Canada of 295,000 and SAS Canola for the canola performance trials of 131,000. There's wages payable included in that of 40,000 and checkoff refunds payable of 138,000. For the credit cards, they stayed fairly consistent. Into the deferred checkoff revenues of 3.3 million. These are the checkoffs collected during the 2021 fiscal year, which are to be spent next fiscal year. Of that net, it was a gross checkoffs collected of 3.65 million with checkoff refunds of 344,000. Going into the net assets, you'll note the internally restricted net assets, the reserve dropped by 100,000, which was the ACC sponsorship. Going into the next slide, please. Net checkoff income was 3.15 million, an increase of 168,000. For investments, realized investments of 221,000. This is a return on investment before fees of 4.4%. For the PSI funding that was received from MASC of 77,000. And there's a new line for the National Market Development Cost Share of 201,000 received from the Alberta canola producers. Into the expenses, the overall expenses were under budget, which were addressed in note 11. Travel and meeting expenses were down due to COVID cancellations. So net income before unrealized gains was 188,000. And then the unrealized investment gains was 323,000, giving an overall revenue of $511,000. To the next slide. Board and governance was overall under budget by 58,000. Most notably, professional fees dropped by 16,000 as last year had increased legal and HR services. For administration, that was under budget by 32,000, and overall salaries were down, but as expected, with one less staff member during the year. There were 2 new staff members added, but late in the year. For market development, that was under budget by 52,000. Going to the next slide. Advocacy was down compared to last year and was under budget by 147,000, but was expected due to COVID cancellations. For communications, increased with additional digital and print media, but overall was under budget by 64,000. Grower engagement was under budget by 157, as expected, with COVID cancellations for trade shows and other training events switching to virtual events. Going to the next slide. Research was over budget by 568,000, but was expected due to a gift to the U of M for 500,000 for the Prairie Crops Research Facility. Going to the next slide there. Note 6 details internally restricted funds. Note for 2022, the reserve set aside for the expected shortfall for this coming year and the $100,000 used for the ACC sponsorship. Going to the next slide. Note 10 is detailing the deferred checkoff revenues collected during the year. For the refunds, there is a refund rate of 9.44%, which is fairly consistent with last year of 9.29%. And with note 10 details the future commitments of the association for the next 5 years. A few things to note, the core funding commitment saw a one-time reduction for the upcoming 2022 year. And in the note described on the bottom, fiscal 2022 will be the last year commitment for the PSI lab funding. And going to the next slide. This is the actual versus budget. As noted previously, most items were under budget significantly, with the exception for research and the U of M gift. And not shown on this slide, on the financials, there is a COVID-19 disclosure, just stating that the pandemic resulted in events being canceled or being switched to online events, and that impacted below budget expenditures, and there is an uncertainty as to the long-term financial impact the pandemic will have on the economy and the organization as a business. That was everything for the financials. If anybody had any questions, I'll stay on and do my best to answer those.
Yeah, thanks, Alex. I may have erred earlier in my presentation and forgot to tell you can type your questions into the Q&A, but I'll take this time to check with Delaney to see if any questions did arise pertaining to the financials, and we'll try and answer them to the best of our abilities.
Perfect. Thanks, Curtis. Thanks, Alex. We do have one question that's come up from Janice Johansson saying that asking if MCGA had applied for CEBA, and I can respond to that. We did not apply for CEBA. Reason for that, we have been in a relatively strong position, certainly considering where other organizations are relative to COVID. So it didn't feel appropriate to apply for that grant. There are other ways that we have, I'd say perhaps more appropriately taken advantage of some things. The 10% wage reduction that was offered in 2020 was one that we were eligible for and that we did apply for. As well, just recently there was a Retrain Manitoba grant that offered some reimbursement for training that our staff took. So we did take advantage of some of that and perhaps got $3,000 reimbursed for some training there. So certainly not big dollars, but there were a couple of ways that we did, take opportunities to find some support for some programming. And I'll just give it a second. I don't know that there's any other questions. Oh, we do have one. So Ron Cron is asking, what's the plan to deal with significant revenue reduction due to poor 2021 canola crop in Manitoba? I can probably speak to that unless anyone else is excited to dive in. It's probably me. So this is something that we have been watching very closely. We actually had our initial discussions in November. Probably even sooner than that, as we realized that harvest was going to struggle last year. Based on our projections, we do expect that we could be upwards of $1 million down in our checkoff revenue. We're hoping that's the pessimistic end of it, but we'll see how that plays out. So what Alex had presented regarding the revenue reserve is actually the plan that the directors had put forward last November to set aside some surplus dollars, some of the gains that we made in our investments, to make sure that we have dollars set aside to support a roughly $3.2 million budget, which is typically where we are in our expenses for the organization. So our intention, and as I said, we are monitoring this throughout. I'll be putting projections forward in April to understand kind of where we're at for this year and where we might expect our revenue to fall for next year, because we are deferred. So seeing where that falls. But the intention is that we would try and keep our programming status quo so that we don't have to take a step back for that year, and support that with the revenue reserve, but also be mindful that, God willing, this is a fantastic year, but we want to make sure that we're prepared. So I hope that answers your question, Ron. Any other questions? I think I've covered the two that we've seen here. So I'll maybe just let us carry on, as I don't see anything else. And as always, our inboxes and phone lines are open. So If anyone does have questions after this, you are welcome to enter them into the Q&A, and if we're not able to get them here, we will certainly get back to you by email, or you can find our contact information on canolagrowers.com, and we'll make sure to respond to you. Thanks so much.
Perfect. Thanks, Delaney. And of course, thank you, Alex, for running through our presentation for us today and all the work you've had to do on our books. Now, during the course of the presentation, the slides might have been hard to see. You might have had some issues, but you can find our full financial report on our website at canolagrowers.com. I see Alex is, oh, he's still around if you needed to say anything, because we're getting to the end here. Here's where I get to actually do some work. So right now I'll make the motion to accept the financial report for the 2020-21 fiscal year as presented. So now I'm looking for a seconder, and we'll see how this works on my screen. Oh, Pam Bailey is quick as draw. So it's been seconded by Pam. And I guess a little pause here to see if there's any more comments coming in before I call the vote. There's a little bit of a delay sometimes. And while the vote's on the screen already, so I guess, hey, why not? Let's use our voting fingers and put some votes in.
Yeah, that came through pretty quickly there. I think we're pretty close to fully representative here.
I was going to say, how bad is our delay time on time to vote? But
it's actually pretty quick. We got some quick voting fingers today. Okay.
There you go. It looks like this has been voted in favor. So we have now approved our financial report for 2020-2021. And then I have one more question. So I'm now looking for somebody to make a motion to appoint George and Associates as our auditor for MCGA for the financial period ending July 31, 2022. So I see Bill has made the motion. So now I'm looking for a seconder. Oh, Nicola Dow is our seconder. Moved and seconded by, so now we have a little pause to see if there's any discussion before we call the vote. Not, how many screens do we have to check before we know if we're okay?
I'm not seeing anything in the Q&A, and I think the chat is all other topics at this point. So I think we are good to go.
And then we'll call the vote. Oh, I should have played the Jeopardy theme music while we're waiting, I guess.
Could you just sing
Everybody
it?
just comment to yourself and it'll be okay.
Do a little song and dance, Curtis. We'll be good.
Yeah, the song and dance is seconds away, people. Come on, I gotta get going. I got some cows to go wrangle.
All right. I think we're sorted here, Curtis. Looks like it was carried.
That's awesome. And I guess that is it for me. Thank you all. And it's the last time you get to see my mug on here. So big celebration for everybody.
Curtis, we are going to miss you. Thank you. I'm going to go off script here, Clayton. I hope that's okay. But thank you so much, Curtis, for all that you've done as our treasurer and as a director. We're definitely going to miss you as you step away. I want to say to bigger and better things, but come on, we know the truth. We're awesome. So we'll miss you.
You're absolutely correct. You guys have a good organization, so keep it going.
Oh, thanks, Curtis. Appreciate that.
Thanks, Chris. Moving on to the resolutions part of our meeting here. We did not receive any resolutions by the deadline of January 24th. Delaney, I guess I'll pause here for a bit to see if there are any resolutions that people are contemplating putting in from the floor. A reminder that is still an option at this point. A resolution from the floor would require a mover and a seconder, and then a vote of 90% in favor of the people in attendance here at the meeting in order for that said motion to be deliberated here at the meeting. So I'll just pause here for a moment to see if there is anything.
Yeah, I have not seen anything come forward at this point, Clayton. So unless somebody is frantically typing, I think I'll kind of stall here just to make sure that we're not missing anything. But as far as I can tell, that we don't have anything that'll be coming in here.
Sure.
Great. So this is the moment where we were going to give our update on last year, but of course we have provided that already. Thank you so much for that question, Ron, and for bringing that forward. So, all right. I feel like I've stalled as much as I can. Everyone is quiet. So, I think we're good to go.
Okay. All right, we'll move on to the other business portion of the meeting now. I'd like to call for a motion to accept that MCGA act as the agent for producers in all matters relating to scientific research and experimental development in regards to canola as funded through MCGA. So I need a mover and a seconder to click the raise hand button here on that motion. The first person I see here, I have Rory as a mover.
Yeah, I have Rory
and Randy. So we'll have Rory be seconding. Let's pause for a moment to see if there's any comments or anything here regarding this, but the poll should come up right away. Here's a poll question. Manitoba Canola Growers Association Act as the agent for producers in all matters relating to scientific research and experimental development in regards to canola is funded through MCGA. Please vote. While you're voting, I want to remind all members that SR and ED letters will be available on our website for you to share with your accountants as funders of all MCGA research. You're eligible to get a tax credit for the eligible research projects. We've applied for a 14.7% credit, and we'll let you know when we receive approval. The poll should be almost done, I would think.
Yeah, we're looking pretty good here.
Perfect. Okay, that's carried.
We've got it published. Yep, good.
Up next, I'd like to call for a motion to ratify the actions of the association. So we'll look for a mover and a seconder on this motion. I'll be looking for hands on the side again. See Randy as a mover, and we'll switch it up here, and Rory can be the seconder. Again, we'll just take a minute to see if there are any questions or comments related to this motion. All acts, contracts, bylaws, proceedings, appointments, and payments enacted, made, done, and taken by the directors and officers of the association holding office from time to time since the last meeting of members as previously reported or are as set. Please vote.
Just about there. Got some quick fingers today. All sorted.
Perfect. Thank you. That's carried. Okay. We would now like to take some time to recognize a few people. First up, I'd like to acknowledge Ellen Pruden. Ellen worked for the Manitoba Canola Growers for 25 years and recently has moved to join the communication team at Cereals Canada. During her time with the Manitoba Canola Growers, she used her creativity and passion for hands-on learning to create unique programming like the Canola Learning Center, Canola Eat Well Harvest Camp, Learn-alongs, and so many others. She was the smiling face that greeted you when you tuned into Canola's Great Tastes of Manitoba shows, which was only one of the ways she inspired people to cook with canola oil in their kitchens. As a token of our appreciation, we have created and shared a memory book with Ellen to remind her that canola will always be her favorite crop. Thank you, Ellen. Next, I would like to recognize Curtis McRae for his service to the board. Curtis has been on the board for 6 years and has taken on various roles and sat on numerous committees, including treasurer and as MCJ's rep at the Canola Council Board of Canada. Curtis has done countless media interviews and hosted Federal Agriculture Minister Bibeau last summer on his farm. He has been a great representative for the farmers in the province, and he will be missed at our board table. Curtis, this is where I would normally shake your hand and pass you a gift showing our appreciation. I guess that'll be for another time. Thank you, Curtis. As most of you are aware, Manitoba canola growers went to the polls this fall with 5 farmers vying for 4 positions on our board of directors. Special thanks to all of the candidates for running, and a big thank you to the members who took the time to vote. Thanks to our new bylaws that allow a little more time for fall field work before prepping for an election, ballots were mailed out on December 14th and were counted on January 21st, with the directors starting their term at the conclusion of this meeting. We're pleased to welcome Warren Ellis and Jackie Dudgeon to the board alongside returning directors Pam Bailey and Chuck Fossey. Congratulations, and I look forward to working with you all. Finally, it's my pleasure to share with you the recipient of our 2022 Canola Award of Excellence.
Each year, the Canola Award of Excellence is presented to an individual or organization recognizing their contributions to the sustained growth and prosperity of Manitoba's canola industry. This year's recipient has been using and promoting canola oil in the kitchen throughout their career as a chef, keynote speaker, and educator. They have been engaged with canola farmers for years and have worked closely with Canola Eat Well as a canola ambassador, promoting the versatility and functionality of canola oil across the country. Curiosity paired with a passion for learning about our food system and how to support it makes this person a great advocate and spokesperson for the canola industry. Their love for tasty food and commitment to choosing Canadian ingredients inspires him to celebrate, advocate, and educate consumers about sustainable farming and fishing. The Manitoba canola growers would like to thank this year's recipient for his active role in promoting canola oil in the kitchen and contributing to the growth and prosperity of Manitoba's canola industry. Please join us in congratulating Ned Bell, owner and chef at Naramata Inn, with the 2022 Canola Award of Excellence.
Hi friends, Chef Ned Bell here from my dining room in Naramata at the Naramata Inn in British Columbia. I am so incredibly honored to be recognized with this award. I mean, what can I say? It is my true pleasure, my life's work to be able to celebrate farmers, to be able to work with farmers from coast to coast, and of course, having a mom that was born in Winnipeg, to be able to celebrate Manitoba and the Manitoba canola farmers. I mean, it's like a dream come true for me. I've worked with the Canola Eat Well program for years and years. You know, I love canola oil. It is one of my favorite ingredients in so many of my dishes. Farmers allow me, help me, and support me to make things tasty, to give it a tasted place, to celebrate Canada, to celebrate our region, our communities. And you know, at the end of the day, I'm one of the lucky ones. I get to do what I love. I get to make it tasty, and I couldn't do it without all of you. Thank you so much. I can't wait to come and visit you on your farms sometime soon. A really quick hello to my good friends Pat and Paul and Jeanette and Ellen. I mean, the list goes on and on. Thank you so much. Please come and visit us soon in Naramata. I love you all.
Traditionally, we would make this announcement at the Crop Connect conference banquet where we could celebrate together in person over great food, which we know Ned Bell would have loved. But this year again, we will celebrate in other ways. If you wish to leave a congratulatory note for Ned, you can find a link to do so on our website. We will also share a link in the email following this meeting. Congratulations, Ned, on this well-deserved award. On that celebratory note, as chair, I declare the meeting adjourned. Thank you for everyone for attending. A recording of this meeting will be made available on our website in the coming days if you want to share this cherished memory with your family and friends. Take care.